Hi, and welcome to Hyper Live. And today we have our special guest, Mike Biggs. Welcome, Mike. And our
Thanks for having
topic for
me.
today, yeah, great. And topic for today is we believe AI is speeding up product development, but what are the costs on team dynamics? What's the impact on team dynamics? So before we get stuck in, I'll pass over to Daniel to say hi.
Hey, everybody. So by now you all know me, Daniel Walters, founder of Great CTO, and do a lot of work with the team at HYPR. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with both of you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about you're recognizing this challenge in the industry around the impact on team dynamics. Tell us a little bit more about what you're observing.
Yeah, so maybe just backtrack a couple of seconds because software and product and all of these things mean so many different things. So I'll just do a couple of caveats and talk about that. So I'm mostly a consultant and sometimes I'm embedded in client. So my observation, my perspective is broad and sometimes not deep, right? So that's an interesting thing to note. So many industries, many scenarios. Most companies where I find my most interesting work and I kind of gravitate toward are not your fangs and not your hot rocket startups where the product is the company. Those are great and that's cool and I can help in there as well. But I really enjoy working with these organizations where the product itself that they sell, the value streams, aren't really the products that we're building. What we're building is some sort of tool in that complexity. And so it just makes things much more complicated. And probably the thing that we build, no one actually cares about in the organization in a sense. And really product strategy becomes more about a service design and a service sort of value stream understanding in the organization. And so then you have to have the conversation about big P being proper noun product and little p, which is what we're working on. And so I just wanted to make those definitions. I'm mostly working on little p, and that's where my observations come from. So what I've been doing over the last couple of years is working with various organizations, and I want to be careful to not call any of the innocent out specifically, on transitioning from sort of a project orientation to product, but at the collective middle layer, right? So one team here and there might be doing well, and that's fine, but you want all teams to have a coherent collective strategy that works together. And it's all of that middle layer not garbage, but stuff, a lot of people stuff, process stuff. And as I said, really connecting to value streams that matters there, beyond knowing how to ship a particular feature, on its own. And in that space, AI has gone mental. And I'm going to call out a couple of tools because I've had experience with them. There's Replit and there's Vercel. And both of those have been easy to get started with, and they kind of do the job on the surface. But very quickly, what we noticed was designers are already understaffed, design teams are understaffed, or shall I say organizations under-resourced the capability of design for various reasons, preferring the idea of development. I think there's a bit of a conflation between the word development and delivery. Both starts with D, kind of sounds the same in a conversation. So that's an easy mistake to make, and then design gets forgotten. And so generally often you've got one designer serving multiple teams. That's already a drama because now you don't have a proper agile team where everyone's in. You've got a service mentality, and then now they're trading off time across multiple teams and not present for certain meetings and whatever. So it's already a baseline of a little bit of bad practice. Add the AI into that, and now you've got product owners doing quick and dirty stuff, which is great. But then that stuff's very quickly finding its way straight into delivery, right? And so we've got that on stuff on tickets that are prioritized into the next sprint. And the designer is saying, well, hang on a minute. When am I supposed to do the detailed work for this stuff? And why am I, just because I'm the last mile before delivery, development, just because I'm the last mile before development, why am I getting all the heat for it? Or the reverse, product owner is doing all the interactions with the rest of the organization. Remember, it's a much more complex organization. You've got many internal stakeholders, users and things. And the visibility of the work that the designer either needs to do or has done in that prototype isn't visible.
Mm.
So that's kind of one of the things that's happening. And so one of the symptoms that I've seen is the designer being sort of short-circuited out of the loop, not able to put forward their meaningful and realistic timelines to work a couple of sprints ahead because we're really busy and need to meet a deadline and all this sort of stuff.
So that age-old problem of the temptation for an engineer or a product manager to like run ahead
Yes.
because it feels more productive is even easier because they've got an even faster vehicle to run ahead with.
Yes. Yeah. So it looks faster, and it's also much more, the tools are much more accessible to, say, a product owner who, let's say it's a product owner who was never an engineer or a designer before. They were some other subject matter expert. And so they can just come to the party, blah, 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 blah. I've got a magical thing, and then, well, just go and do the development on that and design ends up out of the story. And design actually ends up being a real pain in the ass because they're saying, no, go slower. Right. And, oh, by the way, I need access to all these stakeholders internally and externally. And that's going to slow everything down. So they're kind of just here slower. I think some of the product owners are also stealing some of my own thunder. The product owners being capable to do this stuff and not wanting to hand over some of that, let's call it, where the expertise should lie. And I think there's sort of a conflation between the two roles now. I've got a bit of a backstory about how I think that's come about. Do you want to hear that?
Well, maybe
product owners back in the day, or product management, let's call it, sort of lost their way and stopped focusing on the customer. And that's kind of where the user experience movement was able to get its foothold. Designers before that had jobs to do, but this user experience thing really grew and took over. And now product management is back. So just getting my hands in the screen here. So user experience is looking after customers. And now product owners are like, oh, shit, we're back now. And there's this huge overlap, not only technically, and I think the technical bits can be managed, but it's more the autonomy and agency and decision-making and prestige and politics. And so because the product owner is kind of the one working with the business and is a little bit upstream from a designer in a lot of cases, even though design should be well upstream doing discovery on all things, but that's a different conversation. They're able to sort of suppress and keep design in this UX/UI thing. And by the way, I thought years ago we dispensed with UX/UI, but it's back, baby, and I'm really upset about it.
Lots of things are back. We're discovering. In a couple other episodes, we've been talking about how things seesaw back and forth. Projects are back. Not that projects are bad, but projects in the wrong places, and in particular where you need feedback cycles and validation and things like that.
Projects are fine in the right place, to your point.
Yes, exactly. Maybe can you tell us a little bit more about how these tools are being used? Replit, Vercel you mentioned, but just tell us a little bit more detail because people may not be quite as familiar with those.
Yeah, I've kind of jumped into the sensational, fire and damnation. So essentially the idea is within these tools that we're building, there's actually quite a lot of complex functionality. And so to get some of that right, you have to go beyond the flat sort of paper or classic sort of Figma prototype where you can't put data in and it does anything terribly smart with it. So you have to go to the next step. And so this is where these tools have been able to do that really, really easily. Let's say they're really capable where you can do it from a product perspective. You can frame your prototype and really just prototype up the key parts of the feature that need to be tested or discussed or whatever it might be. And then it can go into development. I'm still on the fence whether, sometimes it'll take 3 weeks of arguing with the chatbot in these tools to get it to fully understand and do the functionality that you want. I'm still on the fence whether some features I should just get a developer and sit down with them and write the darn thing. Even though it'll be ugly, at least they know how to do proper, programming from that functionality perspective, where a designer at the moment or a product owner is maybe having to learn that really hard analytical logic, and it's taking longer. So in one scenario, I've got this designer who's spent weeks and weeks on it and having to refine and refine and refine. Fantastic designer and fantastic at logic as well. Also previously from more of an engineering background, so gets it. But that time could have been spent maybe with an engineer doing it either faster or prioritizing, maybe doing some of the testing on something prior to that level of functionality. So the big question is, what are we trying to prototype? Are we doing it so that we can understand the problem and the scenario better? Or is it to define and design a thing that's otherwise nebulous and in our minds and hearts? Or is it to define the whole thing in detail so I can chuck it over the fence into development? Now, we're agile and everything. We don't chuck it over the fence. But the point is, it's at the point where everything's been mostly defined, right?
Yeah. It's almost
this
like
organization, I don't think is completely clear about which one of those they're doing and investing accordingly.
Yeah, I was just thinking of we've cross-functional teams it's been a meme in terms of the ability for one team member to help another team member out, so that we get this nice kind of flow of information and work through idea through to customer. So clearly there's some benefits there in terms of we've got designers who are now able to kind of stretch a little bit further in terms of the work that they can do.
Yeah.
But then the counter to that is that people working outside of their specialization is also expensive, and so you don't want to be doing that for long periods of time, right? It's a temporary thing where it's needed.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is it's taking designers already generally design, research, information architecture. Does anyone have an information architect anymore? What the hell's that, right? Like the UX UI thing, that's back. But where did all the good stuff go? It's gone. And they're taking them away. So they've got a finite amount of energy, right? So they're kind of helping out, takes them away from the other thing. And it's further exacerbated when the teams aren't literally a single team and sitting together. Now, I don't mean they have to sit together literally, but they should be in one repo, one chat space, one thing all the time, and not have multiple back channels. And I'm talking to this stakeholder and this and that. They need to be together. And that's another factor in the story that I was talking about, in that design needs to be in multiple. So they essentially become not part of any team and service providing. So that context switching, as well as, all of that. But I think the key is about, the quality at the source concept, right? So if we're trying to validate a thing, or if we're trying to understand and build whatever it might be, use the prototyping and use the AI tool in the right way for the quality and the quality gate, or the stage that you're at, rather than sort of being all over the place. For example,
do you feel like these organizations are clear enough about which problem they're trying to solve at the time? Because I 100% agree with you. Is that part of the challenge?
No, that is part of the challenge. And one of the more forward-thinking product leaders that I've been coaching realized that this tool really isn't about the solution. It's about using it to discuss how each of the internal stakeholders understand the problem. So we struggled for months and months and months to get stakeholders to clearly talk about their problems, what they need, the metrics that are important. And they were really fixated on, I've got a solution that I made in Excel. And we're like, cool, yes, share it. Let's talk about it. But they still couldn't go to the level of talking about it beyond the solution, so that we could then create a solution that served all problems and all masters, or prioritize them, or whatever it might be. But a turning point was that by using a tool that can generate a prototype so quickly, and it's so accessible to someone who's been using ChatGPT, like you just talk to the thing, all stakeholders can now participate in that conversation and see what happens when they start to build. And let's assume that it builds what they are imagining. That's a challenge unto itself. But let's say it puts together something
wildly optimistic.
Right. So let's say it bounces back with, yes, that's what I had in my mind. then the whole group is able to discuss why that particular solution is useful for that particular stakeholder. And so that's the discussion you want. And then you can throw all of the prototype in the bin. The other problem with these kinds of prototypes, these AI ones that are writing code, the idea of disposable code, it starts to feel like, oh, can we push that through into production? Can we vibe code it all the way? That's risky unless you're really at the point of doing development. I think anything prior to that, you really need to use it for the purpose of understanding and the ability to define what the thing is, and be open to chucking the code away, because the architectural methods that it's come to, and may or may not, or even just at the feature level, how it solves a feature under the covers, may or may not be appropriate for the way your organization needs to work. And you need an engineer who knows what they're talking about to do that, rather than some jerk like me vibe coding and expecting that to move over into production.
It's like the good old days where leadership would talk to a development team and say, just quote for the time on the prototype. But then forgot they had that conversation, and then it's like, okay, no, that's the time to ship it, and let's push it out. But now there's these tools.
Prototypes in production. I've seen some horrifically expensive examples of that. Nothing like 20 people from your favorite consultancy working on something for a few months as a prototype. Challenging, but I think there's all these different kind of techniques developing across the product life cycle. And I think we're kind of early days around some of the stuff. Even engineers we see are really just experimenting with some of these, the document-driven development kind of approaches, where you can feed enough context of, here's what good architecture looks like in our organization for this type of product, and then you get better alignment from that. But you don't really want to be feeding all of that context into a prototype, because that's just making it much more complex for people to actually do that, to experiment with a prototype. So lots of interesting patterns emerging.
I've got a very germane question from Beth. So she asks, do you find it easier to have conversations about throwing away code that has been vibe coded compared to when more time was spent on it? Have either of you noticed this pattern?
My answer is yes, much easier. So I kind of made the link over into development, and that's a problem. But it's not as big as my other problem, which is all the assumptions baked in about the solution, the UX, which opportunities are we hitting. As soon as you put that into a prototype by anyone putting it in, it becomes real. And so now we're validating that. The pre-work that needs to be done around broad discovery, like proper broad discovery, not rock lifting, as I call it, which is sort of an analytical approach to discovery. Oh, we'll go and look here. What are the answers? There really needs to be a broader approach. And so for me, that's a far bigger problematic outcome of the prototyping, because it looks so real and it looks so, so the bit that doesn't get thrown away is all these assumptions that sneak in early. Late, but should be early, right? Not so much the throwing away code part. I think you'll have different schools of thought, and you might have lively arguments with different engineers based on their history as well. But I like those. Generally, I find open-minded engineers who've got their practice down pat are great to work with, because they want you to do the wild and wonderful upstream stuff. It's where you get, and this is kind of the flip side to the thing you mentioned about cross-functional teams, where help someone next door, great, go too far up and down the thing, and suddenly you've got the completely wrong mindset and paradigm being applied in that space. So there's some amazing engineers that can do all things, but it's not common. So I would say generally I don't want them up the front end, because they're trying to converge, they're trying to solve, whereas we're really trying to make sense of things up at the front end. And that's the point of any prototype at that point.
Yeah. It's really interesting how these, change the constraints of a system, and then the best thing to do changes as well. I mean, I'm just thinking of we had a period of time where people could do most of the roles in a development team from a technical perspective. Really good people would be doing the architecture, the development, and the CI/CD, the sort of operational side of things. And now systems have become more complex and more moving parts. And now we tend to talk about things like cognitive load, and and taking cognitive load out of teams so that they can focus on where the value is.
Which is almost literally the opposite, right?
It's that's funny. Right. So now it's almost feeling like there's a possibility of it shrinking back in. Now AI can take some of the cognitive load potentially, but it's quite early days in terms of how that's going to work. But what would you, Mike, from your perspective, like from where we're at the moment, what does good look like? Like how would you advise an organization in terms of, hey, look, here's some patterns, or here's what good might look like in your context?
Yeah. There's kind of two things, and I was about to make a comment on what you were saying, and it links as well, which is nice. I think that idea of a cross-functional team, what's not talked about as much, we talk about the developer type persona who can do all things. That's kind of the idea from back in the pure Scrum days, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. I kind of like that philosophically, but in practice it doesn't work. What it means is we're all one team. I'll go and get the lunch if I need to, so that developers and others can pitch in and do whatever they need to do. That's more of the humility that talks to for me. And it's about we're all inside this one circle, this one team. So I think drawing the bounds around a team and saying, this is the one team that we're all driving for, and we're all working in. Doesn't matter if we've got some overlap in generic skills, general skills versus expertise. I could never write a line of code. I probably shouldn't go anywhere near that. It's just not the way I think. I shouldn't be vibe coding things as well with the prototypes. But that point made, we're all in it together. And so, okay, so the answer to your question, what should organizations think about in these situations, is don't have design or product. Sometimes product is this weird broken thing as well. Don't have them off to the side or upstream or any of that. Make sure you're super clear at the portfolio level. The essence of the portfolio stated as a singular statement, almost as if it's its own product. You'll have some principles off to the side on how we will work. There might be technical ones, product ones, whatever. Helps for decision making down in the teams. And then there'll be a number of outcomes that you might call the O on OKRs, but I don't want to get into cascading OKRs because we'll argue about that as well. But essentially for each team, they've got a very, very clear goal. That is what is inherited into our team. And in that team, we know what we need to do to deliver to the rest of the portfolio and create value. And then it makes it really, really clear to say, these people in this team with these capabilities are responsible for this thing. And if we need to do some horse trading and some, helping out in the back, that's fine. But this is the formal and measured thing. And this is where we should resource against as well. You'll often have these teams pleading for more of everything. And, sometimes that falls on deaf ears, but at least there's a formal structure to actually talk about it, and it's documented, and you can go from there. I don't want to sound like I'm Mr. Documentation, but in these complex organizations, you kind of need to cover your ass a little bit, because later on it's like, well, why didn't you do your work? You're so good. Well, actually,
also the AIs, and the AIs are hungry for it. It's both sides. It's easier to produce, and also they consume it and use that as context. Just to play some of that back, Mike. A common theme that I'm hearing is the starting together and working together. Those are like two threads in terms of what you're putting across, which I 100% agree with. It's rather than we're going to get ahead because the designer ran ahead, or we're going to get ahead because the product manager ran ahead, or the developer ran ahead.
If you're familiar with, you guys would be, theory of constraints or any of these other things, if you've only got a small amount of design capability, it's your bottleneck, but you should love the hell out of that bottleneck, because it needs to set the pace if you care about quality. Otherwise, you can send it into delivery and pay the $100 versus the $1. We all know what I'm talking about, that thing, on finding bugs there. So be my guest, but it's chaos, right? So the bottleneck thing, I think, is even if you've got a roadmap with these these executive fever dream dates that they've got. Don't believe the hype. You have to slow down to go faster. That sounds like a t-shirt or something, but you must go the speed of the lowest, the smallest bottleneck. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we've
and
got
you,
some great
you can hire
comments
more.
and
You can hire more
sorry, David, we've
designers
got some
too.
comments and questions coming in, so maybe we can kind of have a look at some. This was a comment in terms of systems not become complex. Developers have made systems complex. I think there's some. I think both are true. Certainly seen examples of where there's lots of toys to play with. Let's throw them into the architecture, which is definitely an anti-pattern, of course. Great question here from Olivia. So AI prototyping tools promise speed and scalability, but creativity often thrives in ambiguity and exploration. In your experience, do these tools enhance or hinder that creative ambiguity? And where do you draw the line between helpful automation and over automation?
Do you guys want me to go for it?
Go on.
So I think I half answered it earlier, and then I've got a more sexy answer now. The half of it is just being clear about the purpose of that prototype or the AI or whatever it is, and that requires a lot of self-awareness and a lot of understanding of what your SDLC or your product process or whatever the backbone in your organization for creating and managing products and services, let's call them offerings, promises, what that looks like. And so to be able to say we're in the opportunity validation phase, and therefore we must use any tool, whatever tool we use, it must deliver on those goals. The problem with these tools across the board is that they look like finished solutions. They look like tangible things. They're, back in the UX days, I used to talk about how the best prototypes or sketches or whatever you would give are the ones that look half done versus the ones that look polished. And so the tailoring example is, I don't know which book I got this from, but the tailoring example is, if you get the guy in for the final fitting of the suit and it doesn't have the little stitchings, psychology tells them they'll probably be a little bit reluctant to make changes. They'll say, yeah, it's good. I'm happy. Yeah, cool. Okay. But if you've got the cotton threads or whatever, I don't know what they're called. It's indicating it's not finished, same as a sketch, not finished. I can share a lot more. So in the same way, a designer working in another medium keeps the conversation much more open rather than it looking like a finished solution. Now, we probably will move on and get used to the fact that you can write code, to Bethan's point, write code and chuck it. But there's definitely a psychological aspect with humans seeing a finished, polished, and hard-looking thing and assuming that you can't change it. The other aspect is that this is the gaping hole in most organizations that I spend time in. Now, I'm a product guy, but I'm actually really a creative designer type person as well, and they come together naturally for me. And what I notice is the space for active and intentional creation is almost non-existent. So an idea will go from strategy to some half-assed opportunity, and then all of a sudden it's in solution. Someone's come up with solution. Like requirements get written, but maybe they're being written as a solution, and then it goes straight into development. This doesn't matter if it's software or anything. It's in every single step of the way, unless you're in something like advertising where there's a special process for being divergent and being creative, right? So when I talk about design being overlooked, that's part of it as well. Design needs the space and the authority to spend the time to ruminate and think about, as Olivia was sort of, I think, alluding to, there's some magic to be done where an individual or a small group is doing the sense making about what is happening and what can be that is completely short-circuited when you have a high notion of what we need to achieve and some KPI, and then the ability to very quickly come up with a solution and move it forward, and everything looking really polished and nice. It needs to be messy, or it won't. Quality will suffer.
I think there's context here as well, though, isn't there? I mean, sometimes an AI may produce something that's a pretty good average, right? And so
Yep.
for some types of products or parts of the product life cycle, later in the product life cycle, that might be okay. But when
Totally.
we've got something that's really, we're trying to get fresh revenue in an organization, or it's a real blue sky opportunity, then there's much more value in the design
Yep.
process, because the outcome could be difference between success or failure, right?
Yeah, totally. Further downstream, we're more converging. We can use scaled examples that have happened before. It's maybe
Yep.
about scale or optimization, and they're kind of logical tasks. So you can use best practice and good practice if those things exist.
Yes.
But further upstream at the feature level or the whole product or the whole organization, there needs to be space for sort of, I'm not going to say blue sky thinking, don't say it, but
No.
something needs to happen there where a designer or a design function is actively given space, time, and energy to do that. And then the outputs of that are reviewed. Yeah.
Cool. We've got another question here from Beth and Timmons. Some theory out there is that AI tools should be treated like a team member, like an agent, for example, or agents. Another theory is that it's still a tool, so use it where it adds value to the team. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on this?
I've got a pretty hard view on that. I haven't actually pondered that question in that exact format, but my pretty hardline view is no, they can't be anything. They're nothing. Um, um, there's a typewritten screenshot getting around from some old IBM document that I see on the socials, and I really like the quote. It says something about, this is from 1975 or something. So as we're building computer automation and AI, whatever they called it at the time, it can never be truly accountable for anything. So therefore, we must never use it in that context. It can never be accountable. So a human needs to be accountable. I mean, if they're sitting at the table as an agent and the work isn't good, do you reprimand the agent? Like what? How do you? And then how do you also build rapport to say, like when you care for someone, when you care for a person or the team, the thing that shows that you're caring is you taking a little bit of pain or a hit or a personal sacrifice. You're doing that, but this douchebag agent is incapable of such a thing. And so how are you supposed to work together with that? No, they must be underneath a human at all times. Now,
Yeah.
we won't get into full-blown capitalism because I will go on about how really the machines are owned by big capital and then they're selling their services to the organizations and we're all just pressing buttons in the middle. We are nothing. But that's it for a different day.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something we talk about in AI for engineering. It's super important that you can't hand off the responsibility for the code, right? Even if a model or an agent writes the code, then it's your responsibility as a human to take to
Yeah.
manage the quality of that code.
Yeah, to be confident that it's fine or it's low impact and that goes through. But ultimately, if it's a big enough issue, you'll review it. So how you manage it is your thing. But ultimately, it comes down to you. You need to be responsible. It's like we'll probably end up with a slightly modified racy to include robots. Something.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe there's it becomes a team responsibility as well, right? In terms of
No team responsibilities. I love team. I love holding hands. I'm a hippie, but no team. It needs to be one person because everyone is no one.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. I am a fan of team taking responsibility for quality, though. There's an example, because there's no one person or one role that can take responsibility. But then when you get more fine grained, then the dangerous things fall through the cracks, right? No
I
one's
agree with that on quality as well. Yeah.
I think one of the confounding factors with this question is because they are natural language models at its core. You engage with them in humanistic language, and they also respond to being defined as roles. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, because when you are defining an agent, you will say you are a UX designer or you are but I think that the points that you've made all stand, is that they can't actually take responsibility, no matter how much ingratiating language they use.
Yeah, I think we're a long way off before machines have any level of human sentience or whatever we think it is. I'm not convinced we have a special consciousness, so I think that time will come. But again, other topics for other days. But for now, since I'm the one who's going to get fired, right? I'm the one who's going to get fired. No one else is going to do something that can impact that negatively. So I need to maintain control. I sound like a control freak. It's actually that I'm quite the opposite. And some of these things need to be clear.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's the right sorts of control in the right place.
Yes.
Yeah, the same as the prototype itself, right? Use it in the right place, in the right way, self-awareness of why you're doing it, self-awareness of why control is important or not, or visibility. Yeah, all of those.
Yeah. Should we have a little bit of an attempt at summarizing some of the key ideas we've talked about today? Because we covered a little bit of ground.
I'd love to hear back my
notes.
ramblings, to be honest. Yeah.
So a key message that you put across, Mike, was the importance of being more explicit on what problems that the team is tackling and what outcomes we're working on.
Yeah.
And so part of the value of that is to then be able to assess, like, do we take this prototype further, or did it answer the questions that we that we put it together for? Which then gives a trigger point for, like, maybe we need to go back and talk to the designer, or maybe we need to, exactly.
Yeah. I think there's probably another layer under that. So just to add to that, around where expertise lies. So in the question of what are we trying to achieve, and does this AI or prototype solve it? What capability are we applying to that tool? And what methodology or paradigm or mindset, all those soft words, but they're about designers thinking a different way to engineers, for example. Are we applying that at the right place, and is the right expertise engaged? Because, like I was saying, anyone can look like they're doing it, but do they have the expertise in those subtle aspects? Is a question for me.
I think that's a great point. I think one of the big things out of this conversation is just there's a lot of nuance here, right? In terms of, we're in the product life cycle, what's the team structure, what types of products you're building, experience the team and skills and capabilities, balance of skills. Like, all of these things are factors in terms of how you use these tools and how you integrate them into the way you work. And I think that's where, at the moment anyway, I think that's a huge value that experienced people can add to those decisions, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, in that it's funny, like exemplar teams, right? Like, do you want to actually build the capability into everyone, or do you want to demonstrate what's good? Why are exemplar teams successful? Because expertise has special eyes for seeing, right, the subtleties. And I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, go back to the overview, because we're going to constantly.
I've got you here. So you already covered my next point. So I'll go to the third point, which is be mindful about the disposability of software. So, are we validating versus, are we basically just validating what we created rather than those broader design questions? And then that led us into those themes that I mentioned before, which is around starting together and working together. So it was like maintaining that, collaboration around this piece of value that we're all working on. And so in terms of what to do about this, you also talked about having principles of how we work, having, sort of shared objectives, for that work. And then we led us to the, we can either elevate that constraint, or simply maybe we can hire more designers.
Which is, once you've done the most, as the process goes, once you've, actually the word is exploit, and I don't like that because we're talking about a person now, but once we've made the most of how we work with that one designer, then we add more capacity. Sure. I like all of that.
There's one big call out, which I'll finish on, which is your suggestion to consider not producing polished prototypes. So remember, some of those design tools back in the early 2000s, which would give you those sort of wireframe look to a user experience. So maybe we might see Replit add those features or things like that.
Yeah, I can't even remember what it was called now, but it had the hand drawn lines.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they were vector lines. I think I've had this discussion maybe about 5 years ago before this AI thing blew up, and I've had a few designers saying, "Well, I can just do it in Figma in full res and beautiful as fast as I can do wireframes, and then I can get all of that extra feedback as well." But it comes down to lack of clarity around what you need to know at that point so that it can afford you better decisions as you move forward. But because essentially you're clumping up all of your decisions to this one point, and then unpacking the feedback amongst all of that is harder and more costly here. This is the $100 versus the $1 over here. So I do hope there's a swing back. I mean, in fact, I'm always still just going for the Sharpie and this thing. Like this is the dream for me still. Take that, robots. I'm still going to use a pen. I think the nuance, though, in using the Replit and those guys is maybe just don't use the actual the dynamic functionality at all unless that's specifically what you're trying to prototype. If you want to prototype, if I put in some data and it spits it back in a certain way so that a developer doesn't have to do it, cool. You could also do that in Excel. That's another way that works sometimes. But don't munge that in with your UX flows and customer or user desirability. Do them separately.
Yeah. Got one more question here, actually. So as AI prototyping tools become more accessible, do you think they're shifting the balance of influence in product teams? For example, changing how designers, PMs, or engineers collaborate or make decisions? Have you seen any power dynamics shift because of this?
I think this is all personality based and culture of the organization based. So we've talked mostly about a team almost in a vacuum isolation, right? Where we're saying this team can and should work together and there's group accountability and yada, yada, yada. But if you've got PMs or other leaders who have access and are able to create prototypes, for example, and feed them into the process, who are under different pressures and maybe don't live in technology as a department in a large organization, it's possible that they're going to be focused on more political issues. Not that it's their fault, but there might be other things going on. And so this is where you may have an issue around not wanting to draw a circle around the team and have it as a one team, one dream that we talked about before, because it doesn't serve those individuals who are now attached to this thing and sort of expected to feed requirements in. So there's all of those sorts of dynamics. Not cool, not fun, but real of those small P products that we're making in enterprise. I think it comes back to the thing that I mentioned. Sorry, just linking back to the care thing. If people care about each other as individuals, they'll get together, they'll respect each other, they'll give space to expertise where it's correct, and credit each other's work. And where they maybe aren't afforded a cultural space to care, or at an individual level maybe don't care, that those things might not happen. That sounds quite harsh of individuals, but often it's an environmental thing around how the organization is forcing that.
Yep. So the role of leadership obviously still really important.
Totally. This pattern of using Replit is not restricted just to enterprise as well. We've definitely seen there, but also with some of the sort of product oriented companies or SaaS businesses, where and startups too, where the CEO gets the subscription to Replit, starts whipping up things, and so I'm wondering if it's going to become a verb, like the team, like, oh, I've just been Vercel'd, or I've just been Replited.
Yes. I'll start a new one that really just has like appeal and like all the verbiage of a power hungry CEO, and I'll just call it Fever Dream. Fever Dreams with a Z.
Yeah, accelerated fever dreams. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Great. Well, I think that's probably a pretty good place to wrap up. But thanks so much, Mike. Very entertaining and loads of interesting ideas in there. And yeah, really thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you also to those folks that some great questions and interactions tonight as well, which is great to see.
Thank you very much to all. Great being here.
Last one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.